Hi, my name is Vanita Gupta. This is part 2 of my talk. I hope that you caught the first part where we talked about the age of convenience. We talked about what we are moving towards in terms of a new earth society and how we are building a road in terms of moving from one world to the next. And now we're going to be talking about the next step. So we're moving from the age of convenience, and now we are going into how we can look to nature to guide us. So if you haven't watched the first part, I highly recommend that you do, because it gives you a good introduction into what I'm talking about in terms of how I'm defining New Earth, what we're talking about in terms of sovereign communities, and where we stand today with the age of convenience and the work that we need to do today in order to move out of the age of convenience and move into what I am calling the age of synarchy. And this is the next step in our evolution of New Earth. And what synarchy is, what syn means, S-Y-N, is to rule without leaders, to do things together and to organize ourselves based on our own inspiration. So what synarchy is essentially joint rule. Now, right now, when we are thinking about, let me see if I can advance to the next slide here. Sorry, give me a second. So right now, when we think about the type of structure we live under hierarchy, right? Top down, bottom up. It's all hierarchy where you have a few at the top and the majority down at the bottom. And we know what this is like, right? Because this is when we think about centralized authority. Centralized being those being at the top, and they're dictating all the rules that are going to happen that everybody has to comply and agree with. Now, when we think about moving away from centralized systems, some sort of authority or government rule over us, most people think of anarchy, right? No rule. This idea that there is lawlessness or chaos. And what they don't think about is something called synarchy. And synarchy is joint rule, harmonious rule. It's when everybody has equal say and we all rule together. Now, of course, we cannot immediately move into an age of synarchy, right? Humanity has not accepted the personal responsibility that it takes to achieve this. This is what we were talking about in terms of self-mastery. When at the end of the first talk on the age of convenience, what we have to do to move out of the age of convenience is not just only give up our conveniences, but we have to master ourselves, and we have to take that personal responsibility and understand our own individual choices and how they lead to a greater outcome. Right? So this then will lead us into the ability to look at the possibility of joint rule, of synarchy. And what I am doing is that I am laying forth for you a blueprint, a roadmap, so that we can see where we're going and what we need to do step by step, individually and collectively. So what we want to do is now build that bridge from that hierarchy into synarchy. And then from synarchy is where we're looking into using the human body, which is the whole point of this talk, as a blueprint for New Earth architecture. Now, in this transition, remember we're in a transition game. In this transition, there'll still be some hierarchical structures and there will be anarchical structures, right? But the idea is that over time, this is all going to harmonize, and then we will begin to be a self-sustaining synarchical society. It's important to remember that this is the transition game. As we move from hierarchy into synarchy, we've got to start looking at other ways of working together. And so this is where we want to talk about how nature works. We're going to look at how nature is functioning, because nature functions through synarchy. All right. So what can we learn from nature? We learn about collaboration. One of the things that I really, really love about visiting jungles or even visiting forests is really looking at how so many different species cohabitate together in a little plot of land and how they all work together. You can just take a little tiny square piece of land in a forest or in a jungle, and you're going to see numerous types of trees, tall trees, medium-sized trees, shrubs, ground-dwelling, and then all the animals and all the different insects and all these different species that work together in a very small space. It's all crammed in together. And yet, they're not competing with one another. They're collaborating. They support each other. What humans tend to do is we tend to plant crops in these like little neat rows, these monocultures of things, trying to produce as much as possible from the land, as quick as possible, right? What they don't understand is when you're planting in these neat little rows, trying to get as many of the same crop out at the same time, is that they're not understanding nature. They're not looking at the way nature works. They're thinking in their linear point of view, their one point of view. They don't understand how the biodiversity of plants really support each other, how different species contribute to the biodiversity of the soil, which needs to be rich in nutrients and microbes in order to help to create the healthy crop. Right? We can talk about the fact that all of this monoculture farming has led to the depletion of nutrients in our crops today. We see this all the time in the US. You could eat a really healthy meal, a very healthy diet, and be, just eating off of fresh produce that you buy from the grocery store and still be very sick. And that's because the nutrients are no longer in the vegetables and the fruits the way they used to be because of all this monocrops and the way the soils are depleted. Nature, when we look at nature, it's not linear and organized. You don't go into a forest and see little neat rows of trees. They're spread all over the place. It looks like a jumbled mess in our eyes, but there's a rhyme and reason when it comes to nature. We just don't understand it yet. And it's not that we can't understand it. We haven't been paying attention. We haven't been observing. And it's because we're looking at it from our viewpoint, from our point of view of thinking, which has been from this point of productivity, rather than looking at it from the viewpoint of nature, which is just pure survival. And there's a reason for this, because the more biodiverse it is, the more nature survives. That's why nature is looking at survival, right? Because nature is all about creating that survival in that area, in that ecosystem. So in order to do so, it needs to create this biodiversity. And then the better it survives, the more it thrives. Nature is patient. You can't give a seed all the sun, all the water, all the soil it needs in one day and then expect a crop tomorrow, right? We need to give it time. You need to water it over time. It needs to have the right conditions over time. It works through the seasons. And then you get a crop when it is appropriate. But in our convenience culture, we're expecting to have berries year-round and then wonder why they're tasteless and devoid of nutrients. Because nature works in cycles and rhythms, not based on our desires. It would be wonderful to have berries year-round. But that's just not the way it is. And there's a rhyme and reason to this that we haven't yet understood. When we look at the cycles, we can begin to understand how our bodies relate to those cycles. Maybe we're not meant to have berries in winter, right? Berries are a very light fruit, and we need a little bit something more hardy when it's in cold weather. And so there are reasons for this, but when we think about it based on our viewpoint and our needs, we're not understanding the way nature works. Nature is patient and nature is redundant. Redundancy means that more than one single organism does the same job. There's more than one kind of tree. There's more than one kind of pollinator. There's more than one kind of grass. There's redundancy all around, and it works so that it can do the same function in multiple different ways. Nature is also symbiotic. It co-evolves together. Animals and plants co-evolve together. We see so many examples of how animals and plants have worked together in order to develop this symbiotic relationship. Nature is also decentralized. And that means it can lose a limb without losing a life. When something goes wrong, it can regenerate with what's available. And it doesn't have complete stop gaps. It is able to adapt with the ecosystem that is left. And adaptability is available when there is redundancy. So when we think about all the different things that we can learn from nature, we can better understand how we can look to a better understanding of how we are a part of nature, right? Because we're not separate from nature. We are nature. And the more we can operate and understand our relationship with nature, the more that we can operate and understand each other. Because nature is biodiverse. Nature has a structure through this biodiversity. And then when we can begin to understand that structure through biodiversity, we can understand that biodiversity within our human species. And that's going to help us learn how to get along with each other, even when we have different thoughts and different ideas and different cultures and different ways of being, because we are not meant to be the same. Nothing is meant to be the same. When we think of words like rich and abundant, people often think of money, right? It's the first thing people think of. But here's the thing. Money cannot buy your health back again. Once you're sick, it's a lifelong thought in your head about getting sick again. Money cannot replenish depleted soil. Now, of course, money can help you get your health back, and money can help you, put what you need into the soil to replenish it. Money, yes, it helps fix the problems. But could you imagine how rich we would be if we didn't have problems to fix in the first place? Now, I've had gut issues my whole life. The irony of being the daughter of a gastroenterologist, a gut doctor. I've had gut issues my entire life. And it is a practice for me to keep my gut healthy all the time. I have to spend a lot of effort and a lot of time thinking about my gut. Because it was weak before, I'm more prone to having gut issues than somebody who's never had gut issues before. And this is why I have to spend a lot of time really thinking about that and putting my effort into that. Now, the truth is, with all the glyphosates in the air and all the toxins everywhere and all of the issues that we are producing, within our bodies with reducing our immune system and everything, everybody's got some sort of gut issues. That's just the case that's just the way it is. With the way we're eating and the way we're living, everybody's got some sort of gut issues these days. Could you imagine, as a society, what we could do if we never had any gut problems? If you didn't spend your time thinking, like feeling overfull, feeling bloated, feeling, just that stomach ache, and, could you imagine if we never had any gut issues? Nobody? What could we be focusing our attention on? What could we accomplish with our lives? What could we accomplish as a whole? Health is the true wealth. And when we're healthy, we can push ourselves to superhuman limits. The potentials are like unimaginable because there's just so much out there. There is so much possibility. When we're not healthy, we're in survival, right? When we're not healthy, we're constantly thinking about what we need to do to feel better. When we're healthy, we can then take leaps and bounds forward in our ways of living. The same is true for nature. If we deplete the soil, we don't have crops to grow. Nature just needs time to heal herself. She can do it. She will do it. We just won't be around to experience it. So let's learn from nature on how to regrow. Let's learn what we need to do. And how do we do that? Well, the key is observation. So let's take again a look at nature and what we can observe. I remember when I was young and I was learning about the animal kingdoms and, just the hierarchical structure. We talked about hierarchy, and I was learning about this hierarchical structure that existed within the animal kingdom that was all based on what they ate. It was the lions and all the predators on top in the tiny little group at that, the little top of the pyramid. And down at the bottom were like the grasses and then the herbivores and all these little ground-dwelling creatures, all the prey animals. And they were the bottom of the totem pole, right? The top was always considered to be the best. That's what I was taught, because it was like the ones that could eat everything else. And that humans were the top of the top because humans could kill the lions. That's a human way of thinking, right? In the hierarchical way of thinking, it's looking at nature as to kill or to be killed. But animals don't think that way. They're not looking at their interaction with each other and all the environment around them in that same way. They don't create a hierarchy. Predators don't go around thinking they're top of the food chain. It's the humans that are thinking that. They look at the lions this way. The lions don't see themselves that way. People who observe nature found something really different than what is taught in the school science classes. Nature wants to survive because it can thrive that way, right? So this is one of my favorite pictures. You have a lion and a zebra drinking from the same pond, right at the same place. Nature knows how to coexist. Animals instinctually know that if the grasses are dry, if there's no food for the herbivore population to eat, then there's less food for the predators too, right? The predators are not going to hunt to extinction. Because if they don't have anything to eat, they will die. They don't hunt the prey because without their food source, they have nothing to eat because they can't digest the grasses. They can't do that. If they killed all the animals that were there right within that time span, they would have nothing to eat. Their stomachs are not going to adapt overnight in order to be able to digest grasses. There's balance built into the system. The animals don't go around hunting to extinction. Nature naturally provides an overabundance. If you look into a forest or a jungle or anything, there's an overabundance for everything that is needed within that ecosystem. And in our human economic terms, right, if something is in great abundance, then it's considered less valuable. Something has to be rare in order to be considered valuable in human ideas, right? But in true abundance, there is no price. When fresh water is abundant, nobody can charge for it. When fresh air is abundant, nobody can charge for it. And that is partially why we look around us and we can see all of this pollution everywhere. Because now air and water become a commodity. But abundance is provided by nature. Abundance is provided because nature is continually giving. There is balance built in, as I mentioned, where they're not going to hunt to extinction and they know how to peacefully coexist. But there's balance built in because nature understands the laws of the universe, and it's this idea of giving. It's the idea of being of service. There is so much service that the animals and the trees and all of the ecosystems are providing, but we don't look at it that way. We haven't been paying attention and observing. Instead, we look at what it takes. But truly, like trees take in the sunlight, right? They convert it into usable forms of energy. For the ecosystem, you can look at animals. They eat the fruits and they're eating all these things and they're pooping all the seeds everywhere to distribute them. Those are just very general, simple examples, right? But if we truly look at it, we can also see that there is just so much that a single organism provides. And we're just beginning to understand this. So like, humans tend to look at a tree, right? They look at it as a commodity. What can you get from a tree? There's wood that's used for paper, that's used for furniture, that's used to build houses, that's, needed for firewood and decoration. And like, then there's the aspects of all the other things that like we can use and we can extract from them. Why don't you just chop down a tree and use it as a Christmas tree, right? It's expendable. Rather than truly understanding what that tree is giving to that ecosystem, right? What does a tree provide? It gives you shade. It provides chlorophyll. It provides oxygen. It gives structure to the soil. We're learning about the communication networks that exist within the trees. They are water cyclers. They're important for the cycle of water that we depend on as well. There's so much that is going on within a tree. And yet what we think about is what we can take from it, rather than understanding what the tree is not only providing to its ecosystem, but to us. Adaptation and patience are also key features of nature. Nature is adaptable and it takes time, right? Nature is patient. It's humans that need to have things right away, right? We are the ones that need to do things quickly because we're all about productivity, right? I talked a little bit about productivity before, and we're going to talk about productivity again. But there's this idea that we need to be productive, so therefore we need it right now, right away. But nature is patient. And because of its patience, it knows how to adapt. So a polar bear. Did you know a polar bear is just a brown bear that adapted to an environmental change? Now that didn't happen overnight. Like I said, a predator is not going to hunt to extinction because if it hunts to extinction, it doesn't know how to eat grasses and digest those grasses, and it would die overnight as well. But it knows how to adapt to change over time. And that can happen with anything in nature. Everything is capable of adapting. We see this within ourselves. We adapt to anything. We can adapt too. We just need to be patient. But unfortunately, because we think that we need to do things quickly and we need to know how right away and why and what, then we don't allow that process to happen. When we remove our idea of how we think nature is supposed to function and start observing what really happens, we will understand how we can peacefully coexist in the world despite our differences. So what do we need to do? How can we do this? How can we move towards synarchy, right? We apply human thinking to everything rather than understanding things for what they are. So in order to move to synarchy, we need to start thinking in a different way. And the first thing that needs to happen is you need to deschool yourself and reprogram your way of thinking. This is a really key point. Deschooling yourself is one of the most fundamental aspects to changing the way you think and being open to new information and allowing a process to happen. So rather than relying on all the factoids that you have learned in school and that you have been taught as truth, or maybe wherever you're getting your information from, whether it be the internet or hopefully not TV and the news, but wherever you're getting your little factoids, you're being taught that this is the truth. Rather than truly understanding that this is just information. Okay? When you can understand that information is nothing more than little pieces of data that are being communicated to you, when you can understand that this is not truth, then you can understand that information changes. This is unfortunately a very unsettling process, because as you begin to open up yourself to this idea that what you have held within your consciousness as being the truth is no longer true, but just something you have been taught, it can be a little bit destabilizing. In my own life, I've had to evaluate almost everything I have ever learned. as somebody who's spent a lot of time in school, from numerous graduate degrees and a lot of other education, it is really destabilizing to realize that everything that I've learned is just that. It is something that can help me, yes, but it is not absolute truth. And the reason that this is destabilizing is because we have been taught by our schooling system and by society as a whole to be in our ego, that we know things and that we know this to be true because this is what has been taught to us, and take this as truth and then continue to propagate and perpetuate those ideas. Now, when you start to remove yourself from this and you start to deschool yourself, it's not only unsettling for you and your own ego, but it really starts to bother other people around you. It makes those closest to you uncomfortable if they haven't gone through this process themselves. So just be aware that this is an important aspect, but it can pull you away. Again, as we talked about, when you go into a sovereign way of being, it is not convenient. And when you remove those levels of convenience, whether it be the things that you do in life and how you act, and then you start moving into the way you're thinking, it can be really unsettling for those that have not chosen that for themselves. So remember that, this is something that you are going to have to really, hold yourself firm in, that this is a process that you are going through, but you cannot necessarily force others to go along with you, and that they have to go through their own process. This is why this is both individual and collective, and all you can focus on is yourself. It's hard, right? It's hard for people to give up their belief systems because we've been taught to trust authority, to trust that centralized form of government, whether it be the politicians, the people, the TV news anchors, or the teachers in school, right? But the thing is that anything that we are being told and anything that we're being taught is all there to serve those that are in charge, those that are in charge of the hierarchical system, those that are on top. You know that we never learn true history, right? That history is taught and told by the victors. Those that lost don't have a say in the way history is narrated. I mean, that's a given fact. You know that. Well, the truth can be that can be applied to any subject matter, okay? I can tell you an example that I use in molecular biology, and it's the concept of junk DNA. So I'm sure you've heard of junk DNA, right? It's this area of the DNA code. There's a long code of nucleic acid, ATCG, and there's this lots and lots of DNA, and there are areas, a large percentage of the DNA is what has been called junk. And it's junk because it's not productive. It's the non-productive area of DNA. It doesn't code for a protein. Our DNA is nothing more than the blueprint to create proteins in the eyes of humans and the eyes of scientists. And so the areas that don't code for a protein are non-coding regions. But they didn't call it non-coding regions. They called it junk DNA. What we know about these non-coding regions today is that these are regulatory regions. You might have heard of the term epigenetics. This has to do with this region. Now, what is so important about these regions? It is in these regions that you can overwrite disease, that you can overcome addiction, that you can overcome trauma, that you can break ancestral patterns. It is in this region that you have control of your life, that your choices impact the way your DNA expresses itself. Now, you're telling me that we've been cloning sheep and we understand the very fabric of life and can make theoretically designer babies, which I'm sure has been done, and that all of this can happen and no one knew that? Nobody knew that. Or maybe that information was suppressed for a reason. Maybe it was given the name junk for a reason. You got to start questioning everything. You got to start thinking about everything. But you also have to be discerning, right? Because there is truth in everything, and there's also a lot of exaggeration and non-truth in everything. So learn to be discerning. Be patient, allow the process to happen. As we talked about, our convenience culture expects us to have everything at our fingertips all the time, right away. But we're not meant to have all the answers now. We're not meant to. Learn and observe, right? Make mistakes. Make mistakes all the time. Do you know how many mistakes nature makes? Makes a lot of mistakes. Guess what? We just don't know about them because we don't see them. We don't hear about them. We don't talk about them. They don't exist because we haven't been paying attention. But they exist. Perfectionism is a human concept. It's purely human. So let it go. Listen more than you speak. Nature is not pushy, okay? It doesn't demand to be seen or heard. And when you quieten yourself and you start interacting with plants and trees, you begin to see how much they're communicating with the entire ecosystem around them and how much they're communicating with you. Could you imagine if we listened to each other more? Let go of judgment. Judgment is something that is there, that is designed by the ego to keep us safe, right? To keep us in our box, to keep us thinking the same way. And as you listen and you quiet your egoic mind, you can let go of judgment and just listen and observe without putting an opinion on it. And that way you can really learn in a new way. So have an open mind. Get out of your comfort zone of thought. All right? Now, nobody's perfect at this. I'm still learning how to do this. I make mistakes all the time. I have a long way to go in my own life. This is a process. It's a process. And no one is perfect, but you can do a little bit better every day. And that's what's important. So now we know that we're moving from hierarchy to synarchy. And now what this is about is how we can get into an even more expanded area. How do we get to that next level of new earth, right? How do we take all of these different ways of interacting and working together to be this whole organism that's fully functioning together in a whole world society? We've been talking about, nature from the outside and looking at it and observing from the outside. And then that's what got me thinking about our insides. Because sovereignty is not something that exists outside of you. You can't be given sovereignty, right? Nobody can hand it to you. I will say that they can certainly try to take it away from you. They can impose things on you, but it is your choice to comply or not to comply. And that is what makes life inconvenient, right? I can tell you, when you don't comply, life gets very inconvenient. You're going to be pushed out of places. You're going to be told there are things you cannot do. But that is a choice. When people make a choice to be sovereign, There is no power that can take that choice away from that person. There is nothing that can take that choice away from that person. That is the power of free will. And that's what got me thinking. Why are we looking outside of us for a model when everything that we need exists within us? This is when it really struck me. Everything is hidden in plain sight. Sovereignty is an inside job, right? And if the decision to be made sovereign is inside of us, then we can take a look inside to find out what we need to do to keep moving forward. It is our inside that contains the blueprint for what we are moving towards. One of my most fundamental teaching is that our body is a microcosm of the macrocosm. The macrocosm is the earth, right? And what are we? We're just little mini earths. We're made from the earths, and we're just little miniature earths walking around, our own planetary bodies. And when we look at our biology, every representation of our biology is part of the earth system. Now, for the purposes of this talk, we're not going to go into depth with it. This is a whole nother talk. But if we truly want to understand synarchy in nature, there is no better system to understand than the human body. We have a very long way before we can actually put this into practice, because we have a lot of individual work that we need to do, and we have a lot of collective work that we need to do, but we also have a lot of research that we need to do. And what I'm trying to do is lay a roadmap for what we have in our future, something to move towards, because this is finally a model that is different than what we know. And this is a model that when it functions harmoniously, it works well. And this is the key. Right now, the understanding of our human biology is flawed. So we need to understand it from the perspective of new biology. So let's start with the human body and what the human body is, right? It's the most perfect machine. But we've been taught to shame our bodies, to feel uncomfortable in our body. This is a worldwide phenomenon. And in all modern day societies, no matter where you go, people are constantly trying to manipulate their body to be something other than it's not. We distort it, we try to fix it, we change its skin color, we change our eye color, we change its shape. We just constantly are trying to manipulate our bodies. I can tell you, I've dealt with eating disorders, body dysmorphia, and so much more. I hated my body. I hated the way it looked. I hated everything about it. It was constantly trying to whip it into shape, to make it move differently, to be something else, eating things that weren't good for it. I was just constantly putting chemicals and manipulating it to be somebody I was not. And all it did was take me away from my true nature. What happens when we're so focused on hating ourselves? When we're trying to fix ourselves? What happens? We can't see the perfection in the blueprint that's there. And then what do? We introduce more bugs into the code. When we don't see the code as being perfect, we're going to introduce bugs. We don't even know how this operating system is supposed to function because there's so many bugs in the code. And what are these bugs? They come from unhealed emotional traumas, from physical toxins, from egoic survival mechanisms, and so much more. When the operating system is not functioning properly, we feel disempowered. And then this is when we allow an external authority, somebody to step in and to give us something to feel better. Here, have an ice cream. Go buy this shiny new gadget. Have this surgery. And then everything will be better. But it never is better. And then the cycle continues. And you keep searching for something more. The more disconnected that we are from our bodies, the less likely that we will be empowered to take action and make inconvenient choices. The more uncomfortable and disconnected we are from our bodies, the less likely you are going to choose to be sovereign. Instead, you become addicted and dependent on the system. Our disconnection from our body is what allows us to buy into slave code programming. And this is why in the first section, I mentioned that it's essential that we do this work to heal our mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual bodies. It's step one, because without that, you will always be a slave to the system. But here's the thing. Our bodies hold more than empowerment. They hold keys to our understanding of how we can coexist with each other and nature in a synergical manner to thrive. Now, I'm not proclaiming to have all the answers, okay? I don't know all the answers to this. This is just food for thought to encourage dialogue, discussion, and the evolution of ideas. Right now, what I can tell you is that humans recreate the same thing over and over again because there's no models out there. But what if the model is inside of us? What if the model is in us? What if the model is us? The human body is the most complex, sophisticated, advanced technology on Earth. It is such an efficient machine. And when it functions optimally, it knows how to heal itself. It knows how to adapt. It knows how to evolve. It's host to millions of organisms and billions of cells that self-organize and work together to function. It is decentralized and self-regulated. You don't tell your lungs that it needs to breathe so that it can pull in oxygen and exchange it for carbon dioxide and do this whole reaction and then send it to the red blood cells and go all the way to the... You don't tell it any of that. It does it on its own. It functions on its own intelligence. I thought that I knew the way the human body worked. I thought I understood it from a molecular level. Now, I'm not saying that everything I learned was wrong, but there are fundamental flaws in our thinking. And it's important that we understand these flaws. Now, this is a whole nother talk. I have lots of talks that I can give and that I do give, and I will record those as well one day. But, these are just important considerations to think about. And I'm just going to touch on a few things. Now, if you speak with any doctor or scientist or, any educated person, they'll tell you with certainty that they know how the body works. Of course, there's things that we still need to know and blah, 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 but what they do know is truth and absolute truth, right? Now, the biggest problem with this is that when they think that way, two things are likely going to happen, okay? So the first thing is that if there's new information that comes in, if there's new information that's discovered about the human body, that if it goes against central dogma, right, anything that is currently accepted, that information is going to be ignored until it can't be ignored anymore, okay? So it takes a long time for that information to be adopted. So I give an example of the appendix. So it was sometime in the 1850s when Charles Darwin theorized that the appendix was what's considered a vestigial organ, which really means it's a remnant of the past, that humans didn't need an appendix anymore because we no longer were eating grasses, and so therefore, because we weren't eating tough grasses like that, we didn't need this organ that was involved in digestion of that. So that was taken and that was gone on, right? And so nowadays, if we have appendicitis, what do? You just cut out the organ and everything is fine, right? How many have heard that the appendix is actually a necessary organ that's used today? Probably not many, right? You probably still think of the appendix as being this organ that we don't need because the human body is not efficient and it has these vestigial organs that we no longer use. And so therefore, if you get appendicitis, the doctor can just take it out and you're fine. What has been discovered in recent years is that the appendix actually might be part of the immune system. And how are they discovering it? Because they're realizing how important the gut is to the immune system. The gut's important to the immune system, and now they're realizing the appendix might be important to that. They find that the appendix actually might be involved in the replenishment of the gut microbiome once that is disturbed. Now, the gut microbiome is essential for so much, and that can be disturbed by so many different things. It can be, knocked out of balance by so many aspects of our life. And so it's really essential to be able to replenish that quickly. Now, we don't hear that, and we don't think about that, and they don't talk about that because they don't want to think that they have been wrong the entire time. That maybe they have been wrong about what the appendix is, and that maybe if Charles Darwin was wrong about that, maybe there's other things that could be wrong as well. It starts to pull at a thread that unravels the sweater, and that brings up a lot of questions. It's also really difficult to say that, maybe we were wrong, because there are choices that we're making in the way that we are living that are causing appendicitis, and that we don't want to admit that we have to change the way we're living so that that is not a problem that is happening. It takes time for new information that is contradictory to be accepted and to gain any traction, because it's not convenient to be wrong from the past and to change the way you're thinking. And why is this important? Because it slows down our ability to understand the way the body functions. Now, there's another problem that can happen, and that problem is that when there's any new information that's found, it's just layered upon pre-existing information, right? It just assumes that everything from the past is correct and just adds to it. So an example I'm going to give, now this is a touchy subject, I'm not going to go into depth, but I'm sure you've heard about germ theory and terrain theory, right? Germ theory is the problem is out there, bugs are out to get us, viruses, bugs, and bacteria and all that, out to get us, and so we must conquer and really just kill everything around us, versus terrain theory talks about the fact that it's the health of our overall body that is going to determine if we fall sick or not. So and because germ theory was what was accepted to be true and accepted to be the right form of thought, our entire modern medical system is built on germ theory. From medicines to antibacterial everything. The danger is out there and we need to kill it, right? And all of this idea of terrain theory has been swept to the side. You don't have to think about what you eat. You don't have to think about what you put on your body. You don't have to take care of your body. It's all because of the bugs out there. Now, this is really changed the way that we have been living, right? Because germ theory was accepted to be true. They have been putting antibacterial solutions into everything from hand lotions to soap to wiping the wipes to wipe down the counter, right? But what's the problem with this? Well, humans are nothing more than evolved bacteria. We're composed of thousands and thousands of species of bacteria. So what are we doing? What are we doing? Germ theory is in essence saying that we need to harm ourselves. The foundation of all modern medicine was based on germ theory. And so when we start to see that if we're just layering information on something that was not necessarily correct to begin with, then we really have to start looking at everything as what was really true and what is not true. And this is why we have to go back to the beginning. I'm going to give another example when it comes to this idea of layering information and what it means, why we need to question things from the past. So this one's really funny, but did you know that the largest human organ was just discovered in 2018? Now, before it was believed that the skin was the largest human organ, right? It has the most surface area. Well, they discovered inside of us that a lot of our body is lined by something called the interstitium. And this was published in a journal called Nature, which is like one of the most prestigious scientific journals. And it was in 2018, as I mentioned, and it lines our whole inside of our body. Now, are you telling me that we've been able to dissect human bodies for, I don't know, eons? We can clone a sheep, you can split an atom, but we never heard about the interstitium before? Never saw it before? Again, something doesn't add up. We just have to start asking questions rather than assuming that everything we know from the past is true. Now, why do we make that assumption that everything from the past is true? Why does this happen in science? Because it takes a lot of time and it costs a lot of money to do scientific experiments. Nobody wants to repeat what's been previously done before. How many times do you need to figure out that a wheel rolls? I mean, you don't want to be constantly reinventing the wheel, right? You don't want to be wasting your time this way. So of course you accept some past information. But this is an important part of my argument here. If we want to look at the human body as a roadmap for new Earth architecture, we need to take a beginner's approach, okay? We need to take a beginner's approach and go back to the beginning. Right now in our current environment, it's just way too easy to deny contradictory thoughts than it is to open up our minds to new possibilities or admit that we were wrong. Many say that they want to see proof, that they will not accept a new theory until they see proof from people with reputable degrees, right? The experts. They want to hear it from the experts before they'll even consider a theory that goes against currently accepted ideas. But here's the problem with that logic, and this is key. Experts are trained to think in a certain way. They are programmed to repeat what they've been taught. I know, because I was one of them. It's the experts that are really the mouthpieces of that system that has been set in place by the hierarchical people, the ones on top, in order to continue and perpetuate a way of thinking. Now, there are experts, including myself, that have branched off, right? That disagree. And in 2020, we saw a lot of experts break off and disagree. But what ends up happening? The ones that are vocal about it are slandered. They're ridiculed. They're even forced to have their licenses removed. So the ones that are out there questioning the narrative are not allowed to do so publicly. So what do you do? What do you do? If you want to trust the experts and they're the ones that are being programmed, and then the ones that are seeing something is wrong and stating it are not allowed to speak, well, are the experts the ones that you want to trust? So you have to remember that the people who notice that something isn't right, that something doesn't make sense, are the ones that haven't been programmed this way. They're not the experts. They don't know the insider's lingo and the jargon. They don't necessarily read the scientific papers. They may, but they don't have to. They can see that the numbers don't add up. They get it. And this is why, to go into a sovereign way of living, we've got to open up our minds without judgment and learn to listen. The experts don't know everything. They know what they've been taught. And the experts who disagree might be saying something that is actually correct. But then those that don't know necessarily all the details, that aren't the ones that have all the understanding of the science and the data and everything, they actually might know something too. So what we need to do is we need to explore with an open mind, a beginner's mind, and we need to not assume. Remember that anybody can participate in the experiment. Now, I don't want to harp on the fundamental flaws, okay? I only want to clearly lay out the deficiencies so that we don't run in the wrong direction with this model. To create a new Earth, a new way of being, we need to get out of our old ways of being. And, because think about it. What are we doing right now? We're constantly printing money to fix economic problems and bail out banks, right? And what do? We're going to keep doing this and then when they crash, just do it again? Or are we going to come up with something new? So in order to come up with something new, we've got to understand the problems that currently exist. Now, I like to use the example of Bitcoin, okay? Love it or hate it, it doesn't matter. It's a good example of understanding the issues and creating something that is completely new in a different way. Now, it understood the problems that exist within this idea of how we view money. And it took the benefits of what we have with a fiat currency, and then it took the flaws that we have with our modern day fiat currency, and it tried to fix those things. Now, people are like, oh, this problem with that, it's so volatile. Well, of course it's volatile. Of course it's volatile. Have you ever seen a baby when it's born? And for the first few months of its life, it's like flailing about, right? You got to swaddle it so that it keeps the limbs inside, the legs and the arms still, because it doesn't know how to do it itself. When a baby begins to walk, right, it starts toddling, about, and it falls, and it's all volatile. Bitcoin is in its infancy. It's still in its beginning stages. And so it is going to stabilize over time because nature is patient and nature stabilizes over time. Similarly, in any new society, in any new structure that we create, it will be a long road. It will be taking time to stabilize, and there will be a trial and error process in that. There's going to be redirections, and that's okay. We have to learn to enjoy the process, and we have a vision that we're working towards. This is what I'm trying to explain, that we are moving forward with a vision, but we're not expecting perfection right away. To create a new vision, we've got to understand some of the problems that we have in the current model so that we just don't repeat what we've been doing before. So let's talk about some of the fundamental flaws with our knowledge of the human body and what we need to be open to observing and learning about the body in order to use it as a blueprint. So again, this is another talk that I give, and so we're just going to touch on these things. I'll go into depth at another time. But one of the biggest problems of our understanding of the human body is that it's an understanding based on pathology, on dead things, not living tissue. It's based on cadavers, not living bodies. When we study live systems, it's actually done in a reductionistic model, right? We isolate body parts. We isolate cells. We take it away from the whole system. Cell cultures and artificial medium, organs outside of the body. One reason that the interstitium, the largest organ of the body, was discovered because it was the study of living tissue. We don't truly understand the living, moving human. We assume that the whole is based on the sum of its parts, but that's not true. Our body is not a car with parts. We were told that our nerves would never regrow, that our brains would stop developing, that, that a paralyzed person would never walk again. And people are given death sentences. Patients are given death sentences based on the diseases they have. And yet, what have we found? We found that nerves can regrow. We can rewire our brain as long as that there is a will. Paralyzed people are constantly regaining function, and people are surviving all the time. We are living dynamic beings capable of so much more than we know. And we have to just allow ourselves to think in that way. So let's also talk about some of the other aspects that are flawed in our thinking. We think of ourselves as being mostly human when we are not mostly human. Did you know we're only about 48% human cells? The rest of us is bacteria, archaea, parasites, and so much more. Inside every living human cell, even in the human cells, even our human cells are not completely human. We have mitochondria. Mitochondria are bacteria that have symbiotically evolved with us. To understand this complex, diverse ecosystem that we are is absolutely essential to being able to understand how we function as a human. And then there's also the problem that the focus of the human body is focused on the physical, tangible aspects of our being. We just said that we're mostly not human because we're not mostly human cells. But even within that, do you know what we're mostly comprised of? What is our body mostly made up of? Most people say water, but it's not water. We're mostly comprised of energy. We are 99.9% non-physical beings. And so when we are treating the physical aspect of ourselves, we're treating less than 0.1% of ourselves. 0.01%. This is what we're doing when we're looking at targeted medicines, we're looking at surgeries, when we're looking at anything physical. We are treating the smallest part of ourselves. This is so important because energy is what governs everything in the known universe. And when we understand the energy in our body, we're going to unlock the keys of the whole universe. Now, another fundamental flaw is the idea that the prevention and the cure of the disease are considered to be separate. Prevention and cure are considered to be two separate things, right? Why is this important? Because it removes the process and personal responsibility. So if you think that you cannot prevent disease through your lifestyle, then it means that lifestyle changes are not essential to cure the disease, right? What we eat, how we live, stress, all these aspects. This is an essential part of the reason why disease came in the first place. And it is an essential part of curing the disease. But modern medicine separates prevention and cure. And it only treats the outcome. Disease cannot be separate from the whole system. Disease cannot be seen as separate from the whole system. An issue with your kidneys is not related to your kidneys alone, okay? An issue with your kidneys is a whole body issue manifesting in your kidneys. The same thing for any disease. It is a whole body issue that is manifesting in the disease that you have been diagnosed with. It affects all the systems. If you treat one problem at a time, you're not understanding how the system works together. Because we don't understand how the human body works and how it relates internally, in the internal environment, we don't understand how it relates with the external environment. And we don't understand the process of disease. Because we don't give the body the right inputs, clean air, clean water, clean food, and we don't understand how the body works, it's viewed as this inefficient machine with expendable parts. The expendable parts of the appendix and the junk DNA, right? But it's an efficient machine when it is allowed to work properly. And finally, the last problem is that we view the body as a hierarchy. We view it with this hierarchy. And this is the point that I want to spend time on. Now, hierarchy requires management, and synarchy does not. This is something that we need to understand. But before we dive into this, let's take a look at how this relates to the human body. So we give hierarchical structures to our body because we give hierarchical structures to the world around us, right? So what this does is that this limits our understanding and our thinking. So let's take this example to the gut-brain connection. So we essentially have three brains. We have the mind brain, the heart brain, and the gut brain. But we're going to focus on the gut-brain connection through something called the vagus nerve. Now, it was once believed that the flow of information, between the two brains was from this brain to our gut brain, from our mind to our gut. And that's because the brain was the most important organ, because it's the brain that makes us productive. And what ended up happening was that they found that the information highway was 80% that the gut was controlling our mind brain. And then it was only 20% of the information going from our brain to our gut. So it's actually the gut that is controlling the way we think, the way we feel, the way we act. And it was through the vagus nerve. And so, it's human thinking that's saying, well, the brain is the most important thing, and therefore it's, it must be controlling all parts of the body. And, if you don't have your brain, then, what is life? But really, like, it's only because humans are thinking about productivity, and that's what the system wants. The system wants this productivity, because if you are not functioning as, a productive member of society, then you have no values to society, right? That's the way that human hierarchy thinks. You can't be the cog in the machine that they want. But really, the body doesn't work that way. It doesn't matter if your brain stops, right? It doesn't matter if your lungs stop. It doesn't matter if your kidneys stop. It doesn't matter if your liver stops. It doesn't matter if your gut stops. Eventually, if you don't get medical intervention, you're gonna die, because all of these body parts are needed. What makes the brain most important? It was nothing more than human thinking. They're all equal and they work together. If one is struggling, the another takes over to counterbalance the effects of the body. And this is why disease is a whole body affair and not an issue with a singular or a few organs. Now, I love how Sayerji writes this in his book, Regenerate. So I'm going to quote it. There is no human organ that is most imperative to life. They are all interdependent parts of overlapping systems superimposed and interwoven into an intricate tapestry of our physiology. Like the notes of a symphony, their beauty results from the composite and synergistic way in which they interact. This is the exact point. Your body is just this beautiful symphony that is coordinated between all these different organ systems and all these different species of bacteria and all these instruments that play together in harmony. Your body is self-organized based on its own intrinsically known role and the environmental cues. You don't tell your heart cell to develop into a heart cell and then develop into the complex structure of the heart and then to beat and then communicate with the rest of the body. You don't tell it any of that. That self-organization happens. How does it happen? Well, we know some of it is environmental cues, right? The environment is directing it to become the heart. But there's some internal knowing of what purpose it serves. We don't understand that process yet. I mean, we're just beginning to understand this in the complex system of who we are within our own consciousness. But we do know that there's something about an internal drive and an internal knowing of what we are and what purpose we're meant to serve. And when we combine that with our environmental cues, we begin to understand our individual purpose within a larger ecosystem. So before we dive into how hierarchy is a management tool and synarchy fulfills a purpose, let's take a look at the human body. So we give hierarchical structures to the world around us. We give hierarchical structures to the world inside of us. And it's just because that is the way we think. But what this has done is it limits our understanding of how the world works and how our human body works. And I like to give the example of the gut-brain connection through the vagus nerve. Now, we have three different brains. We have our mind brain, we have our heart brain, we have our gut brain. But we're going to focus on our gut and our brain, and our mind brain, and the connection between the two. Now, it was understood that there's a connection between the vagus nerve, and it was believed that the flow of information went from our brain, our mind brain, to our gut brain, because our mind brain is the productivity organ. That's how we get things done. Versus the gut brain, the gut, digestion, whatever, right? Well, it baffled scientists when they found out that the communication highway was actually 80% communication from our gut to our mind brain. And it was our gut that was controlling the way we think, the way we feel, the way we behave, and not vice versa. Now, humans are the ones that put the mind brain into the most important organ because, as I said, it was the productivity organ. This is how we are a functional member of society. If your brain stops working, then you're not productive. And if you're not productive, you're not a cog in the machine, and therefore you're not a useful member of society. That's the way the hierarchical structures think, and therefore it put the brain at the top of the hierarchical pyramid. but it's the same outcome. If your brain stops working, if your liver stops working, if your lungs stop working, if your kidney stops working, any of the organ systems, if they stop working without medical intervention, you are going to die. So, what makes the brain most important? Every single part of the human body is important. They all are equally important because they work together. If one is struggling, another takes over to help counterbalance the effects of the body. And this is why it's important to understand that disease is not a singular organ or a few organ issue. It is a whole body issue that's manifesting in the way that it's manifesting. Now, I love the way Sayerji writes this in his book, Regenerate, so I am just going to quote it. There is no human organ that is most imperative to life. They are all interdependent parts of overlapping systems superimposed and interwoven into the intricate tapestry of our physiology. Like the notes of a symphony, their beauty results from the composite and synergistic way in which they interact. This is so beautiful. Our bodies are these complex systems. It's all these individual cells and all these species of bacteria and all these organs that are working together in this beautiful symphony to play this beautiful music together. That is that interaction that we have, our experience of experiencing this earth plane through the human body. Your body is self-organized. It's self-organized based on intrinsically known roles and environmental cues. You don't tell your heart cell to become a heart cell and then to self-organize into a complex structure of a heart and then to beat and to communicate with all other parts of your body. You don't tell it that. It just knows what to do. That self-organization happens. How? Well, we know some of it is environmental cues, but there's some internal knowing. There's an internal knowing of the purpose that it serves. We just don't understand that yet. We're barely just beginning to scratch the surface of understanding our purpose, our individual purposes from this macro sense of a human and a soul. But then, there's that knowing, that inner knowing of what it's going to do, an internal drive of the purpose that it's meant to serve. This is important because when we combine that internal drive and understand that our environmental cues are influencing us, we begin to understand our purpose, our individual purpose that we serve in a greater ecosystem. This is key. And this is how we begin to understand our roles as individuals and what we serve into a greater system of a whole. Now, it's our consciousness and programming that is, clouding this inner knowing. Instead of really focusing on our internal drives, we are trying to be someone else, something else, not ourselves. We're not self-driven and self-motivated, right? When we're doing something else, when we're trying to be someone else, we might be self-motivated for a period of time, but then after a while it wears off because that just doesn't feel like us, right? What ends up happening? We feel like a cog in a machine. We're not doing our role, we're doing somebody else's role. When we're doing somebody else's role, when we're doing somebody else's work, well, of course we need to be managed. We're not self-motivated. In my former career, I felt like a lifeless cog. I was really good at what I did, but I was working all the time and I wasn't feeling self-fulfilled and I felt lifeless. And after my soul searching and after, when all the pieces fell in place and I birthed the company, Food Alchemics, I worked twice as hard, okay? I had to put in more hours. I had to do every single role because I used to have a company that had all these other roles that I could rely on. But now I had to learn so much more. I had to do it all myself and I pushed myself hard and I felt alive. I felt on purpose. Now, as director of operations for an organization that has a bigger mission and a bigger role, I am doing things that I've never done before. And what happens? I feel motivated. I'm so excited to do it. I'm so excited to figure it out. I love it when it feels good. They don't have to manage me. I didn't have to manage myself. Filled with purpose, self-motivated. There is no need to be managed in that case. This is that feeling that we all know. And when we are in fulfilling a purpose, when we feel like we're part of something bigger, when we feel like we really are fulfilling our purpose, we don't need that management. Now, sameness and controlled versus being self-directed and self-organized, right? We're told to be someone we're not, right? Go to school, get a job, pay taxes, buy a house, get married, have a kid, repeat the cycle. Now, of course, there's some people who want to do this. That's fine. But the problem is the expectation that everybody wants to do this and that this is the way to live life. We're trained from our youth to be obedient and to follow the rules. And this is what it means to be a slave to the system. Now, of course, there needs to be a master watching out and keeping us in line, because we're not doing anything from the heart. We're just doing what we're told to do. We're not meant to be the same. Remember, biodiversity is key to a healthy ecosystem. We are meant to be individuals, expressing ourselves for who we are, working together. We will naturally gravitate towards those that are like us and self-organize with those that are like-minded. You cannot tell a fully formed heart cell to go be a renal cell. A heart cell does what it does naturally. Why would you tell it to go do something else? It self-associates with its peers and it does what it's meant to do. It knows what to do when it does what it is meant to do. It all has to do with those internal and external cues I was talking about. Now, in any artificial system, you can force something to do something it's not meant to do. In an artificial system, you can force a cell to become a heart cell, of course. Just like you can force a kid to go to school and become a doctor because that's what they should do, because that's the way to earn money. But in a natural system, there's an internal and an external cue that allows for that self-motivation. The best doctors are the ones that heard the inner call, not the ones that just became a doctor because that's what they were expected to do. In a hierarchical system, there is only one way and one way only, and all must fall in line. In a hierarchical system, you must follow the rules. In a synarchical system, there is more than one way. There are many routes and many pathways. As a molecular biologist, I was forced to memorize hundreds of pathways. How one protein signaled to another protein, that led to a change in the DNA that caused the cell to do something. And what I found was that it always helped a cell multiply, survive, move, or die. Hundreds of pathways, so many different systems, all to do just a few functions. Move, survive, multiply, or die. That's it. Why were there so many pathways? This is the redundancy that exists. I was forced to study these linear pathways, one to another, to have this function. When the truth is, this is a complex, dynamic system that's constantly happening. It's not a linear pathway. And it's this just overall, like there's so much happening at once. Why does the body have this built-in redundancy? It's because this is abundance. Oh, I'm going backwards. This is abundance. And when there's abundance, it means that we have more of what we need. And when we have more of what we need, there is no system that is overworked and overstressed. Instead, it can help each other out. This is not competition. This is teamwork. This is collaboration. And this is how the body functions. It doesn't compete. These systems are not competing with one another. They are thriving together. So this is not a comprehensive list looking at all these different systems. This is just an idea of how we can start to look at the body and start to think about how we are mini earths and how we can organize into different ways. Now, in Western medicine, systems are broken down and isolated into parts. You go see a cardiovascular for heart health, you go see a gastroenterologist for gut health, you go see an OBGYN for reproductive health. And we've done the same thing with the functions within our society, right? Like there's a sanitation department and a commerce department and somebody who builds the roads and, waste management. And yeah, sure, these different systems speak to each other all the time, but they're not in constant communication. Now, when we want to operate in a seamless society, this concept of operating in a seamless society, this is going to take time, right? This is going to take time to figure out how to merge all these systems together so that this is like a seamlessly functioning thing. But we can learn some things from the body and how it operates as a self-organized complex system. So let's just start from that perspective and what we know, and so we can use the human body as a model. Now, this is just a limited and basic understanding of how we can do that and how we can begin to apply it to a society. But the problem is that we don't understand how this all functions together. We can understand it from a very basic point of view. But the more we learn about our body and the whole system point of view of our body, then we can really begin to understand how these systems work together to function optimally. And then we can get into the real deep understanding of this all. Because this is just the physical interaction, and we haven't even touched the concept of energy. And remember, I said we are 99.9% energy. So the energy field is the key to understanding our overall function. We are electromagnetic beings. And when we think about that, when we think about how we can understand our toroidal flow and how our energies can be utilized to really function, how the body functions through the energy system, we're going to know how to build new energy systems. It's this invisible interweb that exists within us that really weaves this all together. And we haven't even begun to touch that yet. So as we grow and evolve in our understanding of the human body, we can take what we know and we can grow from that. It's really important to remember that while, each part of the human body, right, every single cell, every single organ, it does what it does so that it can survive, right? It does it for its own self-preservation, but it does so for the greater good, for the greater service to the whole body system. It doesn't do it just for itself. It does it for the whole body system. As we move towards a new earth model, we will have our own purpose as an individual, as a society, as a nation. But it will be in service to a greater organism, the greater organism that we truly are, and that is the planet Earth. So we can take a look at our biology from different vantage points and we see certain themes, and I've covered a lot of these, right? I've spoken about, some of these attributes, the decentralized, the self-regulated, the adaptability, and all these things. What I want to think about here and just, consider is that we're so focused on the outputs and the products, but we ignore the process, the byproducts, right? There's nothing wasted in the human body. Everything has a function. Every single thing. Now, I'm going to use an example from my own life. Like, everything has a function, even our human waste. So I've been vegan for a couple of years now. I've been vegetarian for about 25 and I've been vegan for about 3. And as a vegan, I'm constantly bombarded with the question of like, where do you get your B vitamins? You need B vitamins from meat and, all these different things. What I like to tell people is that we have so much to understand about our relationship with the environment and our relationship with our own body. We actually produce B vitamins. We produce them in our intestines. And so what ends up happening is we poop it out. We poop it out into the soil. So what is this? This is an open loop system. We have closed loop systems in our body, the lymphatic system, the circulatory system, but we also have open loop systems. And this is what we have yet to understand. What is our relationship with the earth? Why do we poop out our B vitamins? Why is that? This is what I mean, that we have a lot to understand about the human body and how it operates and how it interacts with nature. And once we know about how our bodies host ecosystems and work symbiotically with other ecosystems and how it works to interact with the entire environment around it, we're going to truly understand that there is so much that we can apply to our own lives and how we function so that we can work as a society together. Now, as I mentioned, because we function as these giant ecosystems, right? We are symbiotically working with all the bacteria within us and all these different types of cell types. When we are out of balance, they are out of balance inside of us. And that's very similar to what we see in nature as well, right? Nature is responsive to the environmental cues and it adapts to environmental cues. Our bodies do the same thing. Now, this is something that is really interesting. So I don't know if you've heard, there's like an indigenous tradition that I had read about where people hold the seeds, like a seed that they want to plant to make a crop. They hold the seeds in their palms for like 10 or 20 minutes, and then they put it in their mouth and they suck on the seed for about another 10 or 20 minutes before they plant it into the ground. And the idea is that the seed then grows into a crop that coexists and has developed a relationship with that human and provides that person with the nutrients that it needs. It's like a tailored medicine, right? And it's truly designed in that way to respond to the environment and the human needs all at the same time. Now, I like to think about this in, how is this possible? Well, there's the energetics, right? Our energy systems that we were talking about. Then there's also RNA. Now, RNA has become a hot topic in recent years, but like RNA, there's microRNAs, and these are our exchange factors that we have with the environment around us. And Sayerji actually talks about this in his book Regenerate, and I highly recommend anybody who's interested in this to read this. But I also believe that we are passing this information into the seed that way. And so it is responding to us. Once we begin to understand our relationship with nature, how we give and take, and how we can learn to give more so that we can receive more, we will have a better understanding of how we can do this with each other as a whole system of humans working together as well. So let's take a look, just at what we can learn from a very superficial point of view of, what we are, where we are now and what we are moving towards as we look at this idea of biological governance. So our current model is we have a centralized system. Well, in biology, in the human body, it's decentralized. We work under monopolies right now, but in biological systems, there's redundancy. In our current model, we look at things linearly, one after the other. But truly, in nature, in a biology, the human biology, there's a web. It's circuitous. It's quantum. There's a quantum field, right, of infinite possibilities, dynamic. We think of things as hierarchical systems, where truly it's lateral and synarchical. It works together, this web that all works together. Right now we need management and control as opposed to this idea of being self-regulated and self-governed. This is what we think about in sovereign societies, and this is what we see within nature as well. In a current model, we say it's somebody else's problem. I don't have to take care of that. But when we are looking towards this idea of biological governance, we're talking about personal responsibility. It is our, just like in nature, and within our body, like cells know when it is time to release itself so that it can serve the whole organism of the human body. Trees do the same thing. They support one another, and one might give itself up. There's this understanding of the personal responsibility and the service that it has to the whole organism. In a current model, we think about it as my way, one way. But in a biology, there's the idea of collaboration. There is no competition. It's collaboration and togetherness. And then in the current model, it's my survival and human survival versus our survival and the earth survival, because this is exactly what we're moving towards. Now, this is not going to happen overnight. Okay? This is not going to happen overnight. We know that. Maybe not even in our lifetimes. It really depends. And it's going to be different for all of us because we do live in a quantum reality. We do live in multiple timelines and multiple earths. And so we're going to see different things depending on where you are in your own personal evolution. But I want to get back to, what this means for us as a whole. I say, this is where we need to start with letting go of our convenience culture. Excuse me. This is where we need to let go of our immediate gratification. This idea that we need to have this for us right now. And if it's not perfect, then it's not, something we can understand, and we're going to have a problem with the process. It's important to remember that this is a process and we need to have patience. So you probably have heard the Iroquois saying, right? That every decision we make is thinking about it not only from the perspective of, the decision we make for ourselves, but we're making this decision for 7 generations ahead, hundreds and hundreds of years into the future. This is not necessarily our lifetime. We are looking for how this is going to affect the lifetimes to come. Every single decision we make impacts the future of this planet. It impacts the biology of our body. This is not about what do I get out of this. This is about the whole organism of the earth and all of her inhabitants and what do they get out of it. This is the service work that we do. It's nice, right? It's nice to dream. It's nice to dream about living in communities, on our own, off-grid, sovereign, right? But that doesn't make us completely free of the infrastructure. We're still reliant on Wi-Fi. We're still reliant on different systems of operation, planes. If we want to get somewhere, we're going to drive on roads that somebody has created for us to go to the store. So there are systems of money and so forth, right? When we're different communities with different philosophies, right? There might be some that are based on philosophies of food. Some might have vegan diets. Some might have paleo diets. Some might, believe in certain ways of educating their kids. And some might believe in certain medical decisions. And who knows? There's so many different ways we can create self-governing sovereign societies and self-organize in ways that are fitting our personal beliefs, right? So for different communities with different belief systems, and if we still intend on being a global society, how do we navigate this all? Like the heart and the intestines are completely different organs that really don't have that much in common except for their core structures, right? Like the fact that they're cells and cells have similar internal parts. We're all human. We're all very similar in that way, but they're completely different organs. They know how to function together. They know what to do. And this is why when we look at the human body as a model, we can begin to understand how we can build as these individual societies with different functions and different ways of being, and look towards being a whole earth, a whole global society, and still be our individual selves. It's one step at a time. There's no roadmap. There's no roadmap that was laid before us before. But now, if we look at the human body as that roadmap, we realize that we've had all the answers hidden in plain sight, just within us. And so just like sovereignty is an inside job, nobody can hand you sovereignty, right? You have to develop it from within. Our blueprint has been within as well. We're still learning about ourselves, our biology, who we are as energetic beings in physical form. We're still learning, and that's okay. We have time to learn. We make mistakes, and we can grow from them. Nature is patient. There is no rush, okay? This is the thing. It's easy to break things down. We are going to watch the old systems fall, and that's okay. Banking, money, education. Collapse is easy. Rebuilding is hard. And we can take our time. We don't have to have all the answers now. What we are doing is the transition game. We're moving from one world to another. And that is the question. How are we going to move forward? So we're going to do this one step at a time. One step at a time, and behave like a biological system that supports the whole, not a goal. Okay? Support the whole, not a goal. Biological systems don't say, great, I made a protein, I'm done. Right? We're like, great, I graduated from college, now what? Like, it's like we're constantly trying to achieve these things and we expect this party at the end of something. But biological systems don't behave like that. Everything is part of a process. The idea of a goal is an artificial concept. You never stop learning. You never stop aging. Once your house is clean, it's going to get dirty again. View life as a process. View this transition as a process. Support the whole system. This is a process to support the whole system of a new earth. Okay? It's about the whole, not the goal. So what can you do to support the whole system? You're going to have to get out of your comfort zone. Get out of your comfort zone of what you know and dive deeper at your own rate. Okay? Dive deeper at your own rate. I can't stress this enough because you've got to know your own level of risk. What you know is going to change your life. It's going to change how you think. It's going to change who you interact with. It's going to change how you participate in the world and how you live. So you need to do it at your own pace. There is no right or wrong way. Every single path is a path of courage. Choose the path that is right for you. Make one decision at a time. There are so many roads, and you've got to find the one that works for you. When I set to quit out my career, I never imagined that I would get into things like homeschooling and structured water and, living off grid and thinking about money in a new way. I never would have thought that one decision in my life would snowball into something so much greater that has set me free in so many ways that I never even imagined for myself. You're going to find the way that works for you. It doesn't really matter. You get to choose. Maybe you want to fight the system. Maybe you want to revoke your citizenship. Maybe you want to live off grid. Maybe you want to have a community garden. Maybe you want to start a community. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what you choose. Also remember that you have a community that works with you. You are never alone. Collaborate, work together. You get to find new ways of working with people. Some people are going to opt out of banks. They're going to opt out of currency. They're going to want to trade in goods, maybe trade in services. Maybe they're going to use Bitcoin. Maybe you are not ready for that. Maybe you still need to work your corporate job. Maybe that's where you are feeling like you need to do that. But you could still use your money to support those other people, right? Use your money to buy from people so that are opting out of the system so that you're supporting, that you're part of that ecosystem. If you're not ready to grow your own food, maybe go shop at a farmer's market, shop at a co-opportunity market. You can support community-supported agriculture, these CSA boxes that drop farm goods at your door or at a local place for you to pick up. Or you can even come up with very unique ideas. Maybe, maybe your neighbor grows foods. Maybe they grow vegetables and fruits. And you have Wi-Fi. Maybe you share your Wi-Fi with them and they give you fruits and vegetables. You can be creative. Learn how to collaborate together. Be adaptable. This is important. Change is coming, and there's more change coming. And you're going to watch system fall, and it's going to be uncomfortable because we're going to have to figure out a new way. It's okay. Process what you need to feel. You can feel that loss. You can feel that sadness. But then figure out what's next. Don't wallow. Don't live in a world that no longer exists, wishing for something to come back when you know that thing that fell wasn't working. Be creative. Come up with new solutions. And be self-governed. Don't wait for somebody else to figure it out for you. Figure it out yourself. Are you frustrated with the education of kids? Are you frustrated with the medical systems? Are you frustrated with the banks? Stop waiting for the so-called experts to solve the problems for you. You can figure out your next step. Take your kids out of school. Convert your IRA into from a stock-based one into a gold-based one. Invest in gold. Invest in barter and trade. Take care of your body so that you don't need to rely on the medical system. You have the power. It is up to you to empower yourself. Nobody needs to make this decision for you. It is you that will make this decision for yourself. I seem to have gone backwards, and we're right at the end. So give me a second while we get this going here. So this is all about you. This is all about what you can do. And this is about us working together. So I invite you to birth this new earth with me. I want to thank you so much for staying with me to the end. I encourage you, as I said, to dialogue with me. You can follow me at Food Alchemics here on YouTube. You can follow me on Instagram. I highly encourage you to share this information with anybody that you think would be inspired by it. I really want to thank my daughter and my partner for allowing me this time in order to birth this idea forth and to be able to share it with you. I want to thank my guides. I really want to thank my guides and the universe for allowing me to be the conduit for this information. I want to thank Mother Earth for allowing us to co-create with her. And I look forward to really, truly creating this new Earth architecture. This is about really creating something that's different. We don't need to escape Earth. We don't need to change Earth. We just need to learn from her and work with her. And we start by doing this with ourselves. So please, please, please take care of yourself and love yourself, because you are perfect as you are. And every day you have an opportunity to make better decisions for yourself. Thank you.